Hello, America and or world. I am Kevin Tumlinson, and I'm here with my good friend and partner in indie author blueprint.com, Roland Denzel. And today we're going to be talking about, I think, a pretty important topic. This is something we were just discussing as we were almost late going live. We were just discussing sort of the serendipity of how this particular topic has come up in a number of ways now in a number of places, and that is the obstacles to your writing, the obstacles to actually starting and completing your book. So, Roland, hey man, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's, like I thought that there's another phrase for almost late.
What's
On
almost late?
time.
On
On
time.
time.
That's
Right.
true. We were on time. We were actually exactly on time. I mean, I think maybe we were 30 seconds after
Maybe we
after
we
the
were we
hour.
just wanted to make sure people were ready, right? Prepared,
Ex-
revved up, ready to go. But we were
Yeah.
on fire, so that's why we were just barely on time
Well, that's one of the problems,
because
and then Roland and I have talked about this quite a bit. That one of the issues with the two of us running something together is that we like each other, and so when we do like our weekly call, we actually end up talking about everything but the work for a good solid hour, or sometimes two. So no
yeah,
surprise.
as opposed to your partnership with Nick Thacker, in which case you guys just get right down to business because like why bother even chatting?
Nick Thacker and I don't even talk anymore. We just blink at each other. We send little Morse code signals to each other.
And then do
We've
what you
had a
want to
couple of
do.
people. I know we're going to get into this is more of a webinar format, but I like to do things kind of spontaneously, and but we do have some folks who've already popped in with questions and things that if you want, we can answer as we go. But the biggest one is Michael Bunker popped in to say that Kevin and Roland are what's keeping him from writing. So currently.
I'm so honored. I'm so
Anytime
honored.
I can keep Michael Bunker from writing, I think the world owes me a favor. That's what
As
I
long as
think.
we're not keeping you from walking or curling some weights and getting even more jacked.
Man, yeah, Jack is right too, man. Have you seen that dude's photos lately? I'm
Yeah.
it's like Amish GQ.
I know he wants to be on the cover of like, Amish Gents Weekly or something like that, Amish Man Weekly.
Okay, so you've got the list, and we'll go down a few points, but the topic of the day is well, I put it more concisely in the description, and I don't have the description in front of me. Do you want to read
You
the
want me to
description?
read the description? This is like multitasking, right? It's like we can, it's like
Bad
when you have
host.
all of these amazing things, like you can see everything from everywhere, then suddenly you're like, yeah, we'll discuss the great tools for writing and streaming in another webinar, in which case Kevin and I can debate whether one tool should be the
Yeah,
tool
we'll
for
do that.
everything or whether you can use the multiple tools for the right things. So we're talking about like what keeps you from writing and whether it's, quote unquote writer's block or whether it's just not having the time. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why people have a book that they want to get out into the world. They want to get out to the readers and they just can't get it done for one reason or another. They can't get it started. Usually people start it, but they just can't get it done. And one of the interesting things that every time this discussion comes up, somebody will say something about you just have to do it, or it's like just do it, or writer's block doesn't exist, writer's
Yeah,
block is a myth, and so we kind of wanted to address those things up first, right?
yeah. And
I
that
do at
was what we
least.
were actually. That's what made us almost late / on time was the discussion of writer's block. So maybe we should start there because I, I'm one of those people. I'm one of those infuriating people who's never actually experienced writer's block. I don't understand what it is. Now I won't go so far as to say it's a myth because, as you pointed out, and I think correctly, that people do experience something that keeps them from being able to write. So, and we commonly call that writer's block. So, in your own words, Roland, how would you define writer's block?
A writer's block is when you have the time and the energy and like all the tools, like there's nothing physically blocking you from doing it or
Mm-hmm.
whatever in the temporal realm blocking you from doing it, but you sit down to write and for some reason the words don't come to you. Like
Right.
you look at a blank screen or you don't know what to write next. You don't know where the story's going. And there's a variety of reasons for that. So whether you call, primarily a health coach, right? I have been for
Right.
years. And over there, people talk about, oh, well, like adrenal fatigue doesn't exist or leaky gut syndrome doesn't exist. Well, those technically, those things may not be like in the physician's desk reference, but people use those
Yeah.
things like in writer's block as sort of slang for sort of a collection of other things that do exist.
Right. Yeah.
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 Okay. I mean, I can get on board with that. I mean, there's been, I've had times where it was very difficult to get the words flowing, but I think probably what's happened there is I have strategies, whether knowingly or unknowingly, I have strategies that help break that loose so that I can get going. One of those for me, and maybe this will be helpful to some folks, is to I free write. So if I sit down to the page and I don't have any idea what I'm going to write, rather than let it stop me from writing, I just start typing something. And sometimes it's simple things like I may look around and say, okay, where am I right now? Like, can I describe where I am right now and what it means to me? And so I do that, and then by the time I'm done doing that, I'm kind of in the flow, and I can keep going. And when it comes to the fiction, it's sort of the same way. So if I'm in a scene and I don't know what to do next, I may actually start describing the scene or describing what Dan Kotler is thinking, or describing an object in the room that he's in, or something like that. And then from that point, it just sort of happens. The writing just sort of happens at that point. I know that sounds more like magic than a process, but that's just seems to be the way it works.
You're actually the third person in the last week that's mentioned free writing as a method to sort of get things flowing again. And
Yep.
my experience with free writing was in like middle school or in high school, where the creative writing teacher said, just don't lift your pen from the paper. This is back in the cursive writing days, I guess, right? But don't,
Right.
Just keep writing, and like, I'm going to stop you in 30 minutes. Well, 30 minutes. I'm like, I didn't even know where to begin. I would like start with my name is Roland Denzel and like just start like writing this stuff. And like sometimes that would be like the whole page of that stuff, because for some reason my mind doesn't work that way. But I've been inspired by you, now the third person. I've been inspired by all three of you on Instagram, Facebook, and here to give that a shot, because I do sometimes not know where the scene is coming from.
Right.
In my nonfiction, I never have that problem, but in my fiction, sometimes I do. So fiction is newer for me, so I'm willing to give that a shot.
Yeah.
I have a question though. Is this something that do you find yourself that was more common earlier in your writing career? Like now that you've written a lot of books. So now that you've written all these books, do you not have that problem as often?
I don't. Yeah, I never have that problem. These days I never have a moment where I sit and don't know what to write. I always jump right in. But I do think that that's an acquired skill. Like that's been 47 years in the making, not something I was born with. But I don't remember really a time in my life where I just couldn't think of what to write, even in those little exercises you mentioned in like grade school. I mean, I may have done the same thing you did. My name is Kevin, and I'm sitting in a classroom. My teacher's a jerk. But I don't recall.
You said it was free writing.
It was free writing, right? I have those notebooks though. I still have all my
I would be
old spiral notebooks.
I would be interested to see what little Kevin,
young
has
Kevin,
written. Young Kevin.
We'll have to take a look at. Do we want to answer any questions right now, or
Sure.
are we going to move into points? We got this is an early one from Pamela. I seem to have run into a roadblock because every time I sit down to type, one of my sister's family seems to have a baby emergency, and I have to get right back and go deal with it. So that is the family is intruding on writing time conundrum. So how do writers deal with family and other personal obligations intruding on writing time? have some thoughts on this too.
I do too. I recently took the master class by Joyce Carol Oates. Oaks.
Okay.
I don't know, however you say your last name. I can slur
Yeah.
it, and then you don't know which one of it I'm saying, right?
Joe
Master Carol Oates, right? And she said that the biggest barrier to becoming a successful writer was all the interruptions. She said it more eloquently than I did, but she had a very stern look on her face when she like wagging her finger, like interruptions are what kills the writing flow. So I think that's true for me. I don't know if it's true for you, Kevin. It's hard to get back into it. There's the switching costs that we talked about last week, like when you go from one thing to the other, right? So it's Pamela, right? So Pamela is getting interrupted by sisters with emergencies, which is, especially nowadays, like we have like we're really ready to try to jump when somebody needs us, especially our close family. But what I would ask is, or consider is, how big of an emergency is it? Is it like a babysitting emergency? Is it an emergency like I'm calling you right now because I need something later? Or is it the kind of emergency like, oh my God, you have to drop what you're doing and come help me? Because those are two totally different things. Because if you need to drop what you're doing, if you get interrupted in order to help tonight when the person needs to go to work or something like that can wait an hour until you're at your next logical writing break stop to answer. So it's very common for people to have their phone sitting like right there, and it rings and the screen turns on and it vibrates or it dings. And nowadays we have our computers hooked in to where like your notification that somebody's calling will show up on the top of your screen while you're writing. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, it's almost like you have to classify things differently and if there's truly a reason that somebody would need to reach you in a real emergency, give them a way to do it. But non-emergencies, things that are important but not time critical, find a way to sort of keep those type of notifications and alerts on the down low until you have a logical writing break.
Yeah. Do you use like the Covey grid of important, not important?
Important, timely, important. Yeah. That's great. It's great. Now, it's hard to get your phone to understand the Covey grid, but like what I do is like my children can reach me because my phone, I have an Android phone, and if you call the phone, it's in snooze or whatever, do not disturb, and if you call it twice within 10 minutes, the second time it will ring because it's like, oh, this must be really important. Or I think it's the third time. Like I have it set up. So that's one feature of some phones. So my kids can still reach me. You can also give them if it's a true emergency, my daughter knows and my son know to call my wife. Right. And so if I'm in the middle of something, like no one's going to disturb me during this webinar, right? And I'm not like my phone is upside down. But if it's a true emergency, they know how to reach my wife, and then my wife's going to come and say, "I don't care what you're doing. You get off the webinar."
We deal with this now.
Yeah, there's a hurricane or a tornado coming.
Yeah, I think one of the ways, so I just wrote an article about this on the Drafted Digital blog about finishing your book, and the same sort of deal. And one of the ways that I recommend people deal with, finding writing time, quote, finding writing time, is to start with a regular routine that you're committed to. And this is you can let everyone know. And I'm gonna preface this by saying people don't listen to you when you say don't interrupt me during this time. That's okay, but it's still important to commit to that personally and tell people, hey, look, this time between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. or this time between 10 and midnight, this is my writing time, so I'd appreciate if you don't bother me. So that's a sort of magical cure that doesn't always work, right? But it's not important that it always work. What's important is that you have an established routine that you more often than not are writing during that time, so that you always know this is my set aside writing time. I'm committed to it. I'm personally committing to it, and I'm going to let everyone know this is my writing time. And then when you can, you give gentle reminders sometimes those turn into big screaming matches with spouses and that sort of thing. But if you make a point of every time someone interrupts you during that time saying, look, this is my writing time and I'll be free at 9 a.m. to deal with whatever you got. A lot of times, eventually, people will come to respect that, and the emergencies start to sort of die down. I go so far as I turn off all notifications on my phone, computer, whatever I'm using to write with. Everything gets shut off, and just like you were saying, everything gets shut down during that writing time. And you can, with some of the phones and things, you can actually schedule that. So do not disturb time.
Yep.
But the important part there really is to have that established routine, because once you've decided this is my writing time. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. There's another part of this that's very important, and it's establishing trust in the person that you're scheduling that writing time away from, right? So if you say, I'm going to have this time to write, but I'm going to be checking my messages, or I'm going to be checking in with you at a certain point, it's important that you actually do that and you follow through. Because once, like whether it's kids or your spouse or your sister, if they know that they only have to wait X number of minutes or until a certain time, then they're going to start to respect that you're actually telling the truth, and that you mean it, right? So, I'm going to be writing until 9 o'clock in the morning. And then if like you answer, at 9:05, they pick up the phone and call them back. They know that, oh yeah, it's true. I only, but if they don't see that you're following through with that, they're going to say, she doesn't call me back anyway, or he doesn't call me back anyway. I really need to know this. Right. I'm just going to keep sending messages, or I'm going to knock on the door.
This is where it's important to show that, to make that commitment and show that you are committed to that time, to the point of occasionally you might have to just have the fight. But if no one's going to take you seriously if you say, look, I write between 6 and 9 in the morning, and then every time they show up, you willingly drop whatever you're doing to go help out. That's a sign that you don't actually want to be there. So that comes down to more personal commitment.
Well, I mean, I'd also say that one of the things, if you can consider that when you are in this writing mode and you're telling your family and friends that you're offline, right? It's probably not a good idea to also be posting on Facebook or Instagram, because they might see that and they're like, well, wait a minute, I thought you were writing, like you do this. So then that takes it away. So that sort of takes away the weight of your argument.
Right. Exactly right. All right. So what on our list? Well, actually, we have a question from Chris Tadlock, who says, what keeps me from writing? Working on my first book now. It's the fear that I only have one story in me, and when I'm done, I'm done. So success as failure is kind of the idea there. So what do you have to say to our friend Chris there?
Yeah, I mean, I used to feel that way as well. Like I had this one story that I wanted to write, but then it's sort of, I thought about, like, I sort of fell in love with my own characters, and then decided, like this person has a backstory. I can explore that. Like, what if later on something's gonna come out there? There could be a spin-off, because the side character needs to be explored as well. And so, and it actually kind of works out well, I believe, for most authors if they can think about that sort of self-contained thing, because you write mostly in series, and that's also what's selling. So if you want to be as successful, if you want to make money as an author, whether it's like a part-time living, your best shot as it right now is to write something that your readers will read and then want to read the next one. And most likely that is the same characters or the same setting or a continuation of the story, something like that. So that's, once I sort of realized that, like, I just started writing. Like, I'll be in the middle of the book and I'll like think of scenes that don't really fit, and think, wow, that could be a great story later. It could be a great next book.
I don't think any writer should worry about this. Is this the only story I have in me? We tend to tell stories every day, like hundreds of them. We have ideas all the time. One thing about writing your book is as you're writing it, you'll get more ideas, more than you should put in one book, by the way. Like, the tendency for new authors is to try to put all the good ideas they have in one book, so they have this like mess by the time it's all over. This incoherent story. But tell the story, do it justice, you know. And if you have another idea, jot it down somewhere and save it for later, or let it just. I like to let those bloom naturally, and they either produce fruit or fall off the vine. The way I think of it, but you know, if you feel like you need to catalog those somewhere, you know, there are all kinds of ways to do that. I keep ideas in Trello, which is kind of an easy way for me to reference back to them. I've got a Trello board of like 1,000 ideas. I don't think I've ever actually gone back to it and written any one of them.
Oh, well, that makes me feel better, I guess. I was going to talk to you. I mean, Kevin has recently got me interested in using Trello. I still use Evernote as like a sort of a filing system, but I was joking about Evernote is you put something in Evernote, you're never going to lose something if you put it in Evernote. You're also never going to find it again.
You're never going to find it again.
Right. Yeah. So,
right.
yeah. So, but I do keep them in there, and I try to use more keywords so I can search it. But there are people who really struggle sometimes to have an idea, right? So most of my ideas start from a character. There's somebody that I want to tell the story about. I don't know sometimes I don't know the story. Sometimes it's just a scene. So sometimes it takes that character, whether it's an aspect of me or somebody I met at a coffee house or a relative or somebody I saw in another book or a movie or TV show. And then I will, put my own spin on that character and like write that person into a scene and see where that goes. So there's really no wasted writing. Like you can, when you could write a book. Sometimes I write a scene that I know is never going to show up in my book because it helps me get through the process, the backstory, the secret backstory that's never revealed, but I need to know, and that later on sometimes can become like a story all to itself. So that in when I first started writing in high school and college, they gave us writing prompts. And I think writing prompts, especially early on or when you're stuck, are a great way to sort of get the ball rolling. And there are great books about that. Brian Cohen has a whole series of books and workbooks that you can get to spark the flow of writing.
Yeah.
You disappeared.
Did I? I don't know why that happens, but hold on.
If anything, you're more handsome than ever.
This is why I can't. Yeah, this is why I can't reference other things on the phone, on my iPhone, when I'm doing this on the iPhone. So
I'm writing this down.
I actually have my first thriller was written using a whole bunch of spare parts from other stories I'd started and stopped.
Really?
So I have this I have a series of vignettes in the front of the book that make up the prologue that all started as what I call my thirds, and they're the first third of a book. For years I would start a book and get about a third of the way through, and I'd abandon it. For that was a big chunk of my early writing life. I've since used all those thirds to write other books, but my first thriller, Coelho Medallion. When Nick dared me to write that, I didn't know where to start. I had, quote, writer's block, right? So I took those disparate pieces and pulled them together and to give myself a starting place. And I turned those thirds into scenes, trimmed off the fat, and put it together as a prologue. And then that informed the story I was going to write. From that point, I had this sort of weird mishmash of scenes, and that I tied together with one common thread, and that thread became the story in the novel. So, that's one reason to kind of keep some of your ideas around, because you never know how you're going to end up using that stuff.
That's true. And you can often think of also when people are stuck. A lot of people like to write short stories to work through certain things. Point of view, experiments. Like you have a tiny little story you want to tell. You have a scene, like a mic. You can write all these things, and that doesn't necessarily mean that idea is lost forever. You can show it to people, and you can reframe it. History is filled with authors who have written, dozens or 100 books, and you can see those scenes or, slightly changed versions of them like manifest themselves throughout their writing career. So,
Right.
and those are great ways to figure things out. And some of them have even taken, a bunch of these short stories and made them into something like a novel. I think it's called what do you call a novel that's put together like that? I don't remember.
Anthology?
No, it's like when you take short stories that are somewhat related and you stitch them together to make like one story. And
Okay.
a makeup novel or workup novel. I don't know what it's called.
Oh,
Talking to JR. I was talking to JR Hanley the other day about it. He mentioned it, so I had a big discussion about that.
I tried doing something like that early in my career, and a seasoned author told me, "No way does this. This is the wrong way to write a book," and so I never did try it again.
I don't know if you've watched The Witcher, but I think The Witcher is similar, right? So like those the first two books are short stories that are strung together in a semi-cohesive narrative with an arc. So each one is almost like, Hercules or Xena Warrior Princess kind of level of storytelling. But there is an overall story that's also told as well. And then that got popular enough. He learned a lot, developed the characters, and took it off into novels, and now it's a Netflix show.
Now it has Superman playing the lead.
That's right.
So let's talk about, because the big common question is, how do I find time to write, right? That seems to be the biggest. I think that's probably, when I ask people what the biggest obstacle is to writing or finishing a novel, that's the one I get back the most. I don't know about you. So what are some ways people can find time to write?
Well, before I say that, I'm gonna say there's three things here. There's the ability, like, to have that time, right? Like sometimes it's just not the right time. But assuming this is the right time, do you have the desire to find that time? Do you really have the desire to put that book out in the world and finish it, right? And then are you willing to get creative and think logically about how you're using your time now, not necessarily even to get rid of some things, although that's a distinct possibility, but to reorganize your day in such a way to where you can write when you will have the ability to do it. For instance, I need to write when there's nobody around talking to me, and when it minimizes the disruptions. And it's really hard. My wife works in the same house. Most people are working together or in the same house these days, right? You're working together in a tiny little house, right?
We're in a van,
But so I need private time. And it's hard for me when I hear my wife get up in the morning to not go out and start talking and start off the day, because I know she's got to get to work. We don't have that much time. So we go to bed at the same time. I usually fall asleep right away. She stays up and read. But on the other hand, I get up early and make my cup of coffee, go in my office, close the door, and I write for about an hour and 15 minutes until I hear her get up. So she gets up on a pretty good schedule. So I know how much time. And she doesn't come and really say anything until I come out there in the morning. So she's over time. She knows I'm coming, and so she doesn't bother me. So, not that it would be a bother, honey, but so that's one example.
So similarly, for those who don't know, my wife and I both currently we live in a travel van. We just downgraded from a travel trailer to a much smaller space, about 120 square feet. I've decided. So the challenge is, you don't get a private space when you live in 120 square feet. So one of the ways that I make time is, she and I have an agreement, and it's taken some time because we both like to chat with each other. One of the great things about being married and being in love with each other is that you like each other, and so you want to talk to each other. But when one of you or both of you has to focus on something, it can be challenging if you're in a small space. So the agreement we came to was, so these AirPods, these are my office. So when these are in, I'm generally playing music. Generally, I'm playing like jazz or something that's, there's no like lyrics or anything, and it's just, I can kind of disappear into it a little. I pump the volume up pretty high so that I'm not being distracted by outside noise. But what we've really done there is we've set parameters. So if you're in a home, having a dedicated space is great, but you don't necessarily even need a dedicated space. I remember reading On Writing by Stephen King, and he was talking about how in the early days of his career, he and his wife lived in a trailer home, and the only space he could find was in the little laundry room. Basically, he crammed a little tiny desk in among like the washer and dryer, so that he had a door to close, so that he could sit and write. Some people write at their kitchen table. The important thing is that everyone knows, like we said earlier, this is your writing time, this is your writing space, and it's important that you be able to focus. So you agree upon these terms in advance, so that you don't have to have the fight at the moment you're sitting down and trying to write. So define your work to other people is a good way to quote make time. You're never going to just make time. You just got to take time when you can find it. But if you've got established routines, I mean, that goes a long way.
Yeah. And I used to be, I'm not a mean person, but I used to just sort of beat around the bush a little bit when somebody would say, like, well, I don't have time to write a book. Well,
yeah,
there are people who legitimately don't have time to write a book. Our friend Jim Heskett, in theory, didn't have time to write a book, but he wrote a book in snippet. He taught himself to be able to use half an hour here, 15 minutes here, 20 minutes here. So he taught himself so he didn't need that ramp up time to get going. He would just go from zero to go, zero to hero, right? And he wrote a whole bunch of books on his lunch break, on his before he drove into work, etc. So like tiny little bits. So he found the time, right? Because he wanted to do it. There are people who I used to put people through this routine where like, oh, well, why don't you keep track of all the stuff you do, right? Just like keep everything you do today, just every single thing. You got up and made coffee, write it down. You had lunch, you got it down. Went to the grocery store, whatever. All these different things. You watched Netflix, write it down. How many shows did you watch? Like how long, all those kinds of things. I don't do that anymore because I found an easier way is just to tell people to the night before when they go to bed, write down on their calendar or on some sort of a whiteboard or chalkboard or some piece of paper that you can put on top of your computer, what you're going to do the next day.
Right.
Write down your writing, like, schedule it out, because like once you're faced with this, you know all the stuff you're not doing, like Netflix or scrolling on Facebook, because it's not there. You might miss it, and you might feel like, you know what, I really deserve those things, and I'm going to work them in. Put them on your calendar. Put them in. Put them
I
there
live
too.
and die by my calendar. If it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. That's the rule in Kevin's world. You mentioned Jim Heskett. Hello, Jim. And another friend of ours, Michael Laron, is a very busy guy. Like he's in law school. He works as an accountant. He's got family obligations, and he's got all these things happening. But he still publishes a book like every month. And he's including he's got like YouTube channels and stuff like that. One of the ways he does this is he writes using his iPhone. Like he actually uses his thumbs and types his books into his iPhone. Now, you don't have to do that, but the point here, now I've done it, and it can be a great way to work things in, but the point here is he had the drive to write, and he needed to, quote, find the time, and he had these little pockets of time throughout his day between, on the train, the commute to work on the train, in the bathroom, whatever. You've got these little pockets. So you might start looking around and trying to gather some of those together. Now, that said, you may not be writing in the way that you think writing should be done. So the other advice I would give is do a little bit of rethinking and reconsidering about what writing actually is, and try something new, because there are folks who are doing like dictation. Now, I don't do dictation, but I've talked to many authors who are doing it, dictating their novels, dictating their nonfiction books, and they're having a great deal of success doing that. I find that pretty amazing. But there are lots of options for doing that now. Dragon, what's the app?
Dragon Anywhere.
Dragon Anywhere. I've talked to folks who use Otter.ai, which is like a transcription service. There's all kinds of ways to dictate your books. So while you're driving, or while you're running, or whatever you do, when you're not, focused on your job or whatever. But it's all about finding these little pockets of time throughout the day. Doesn't sound the same kind of sexy as having, a big office with a giant oak desk and
Glass of
jazz playing or
whiskey.
whatever. Yeah, I tell you though, since we've been downsizing, getting into the travel trailer and now the van and all that, I've changed the way I do things quite a bit. I've started writing on my iPad and iPhone more, and the way I write, the space I write in, all that has changed. So it can do you a lot of good. It can actually be reinvigorating and get you excited about the writing when you have to try something new. So.
Yeah, it's very true. And there are, like what you say, like rethink the way what you're writing. Or like I would also say that there are different types of writing. There is the initial story. Like you may not have it in you to write an entire story with dialogue and everything, right? But
Right.
through dictation at first, or through your thumbs on your iPhone. But you might be able to tell your story, right?
Right.
So then you can, so now you have a really good outline. Like you have a really fleshed out outline. You don't have, where all the holes are, you've patched them, and now you're just going
Yep.
in there and then you're fleshing out the details. You might find success in that way. Another thing that I do is I outline when I have spare time on a piece of paper. I outline the overall arc of my series.
Yep.
Here's things I want this to happen with this character. Over time, I want these things to happen. And I find it really helpful to just write it down on a piece of paper. And so I don't lose them. I scan them and lose them forever in Evernote. But in the meantime, I've worked through that in my head. And so subconsciously, I now know the solution to my problem. So I've written a story, and that's going to help me with my book later when I do have the time.
Yeah. We have Mikey Campling popped up to say that Dragon Naturally Speaking, the pro version, can transcribe an audio recording. So I think that's only on your
Has to be
computer,
Windows.
right? Yeah, is
Has
that
to be
Windows only?
Oh yeah, or if you still have the old version of the Mac stuff and it's still working, you can still do it. But yeah, Dragon Naturally Speaking can certainly do that. And I've had some good results with that with my nonfiction. I haven't done so great with my fiction yet. I just get lost in the story when I start talking.
I just can't do it.
I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna say. Like, what is happening now? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of podcasting and broadcast stuff, and so I have no problem recording audio and just talking stream of consciousness off the top of my head. But when I start thinking of it as the book, that if I have writer's block at all, that's got to be it. That's got to be it. I'll start.
Mikey, if you've had some success with Dragon, and either in dictating on your screen or in like as you walk and talk, I would love to know like how you. I mean, I know it's not going to be the same for everybody, but I want to make this happen because I have this dream of being able to go. I'm a passionate walker, right? I love going out for walks. I have this dream of being able to like take that because that's spare time. I have this dream of being able to like walk and talk my stories like Kevin J. Anderson, right?
Yeah.
But and maybe like one day I'll get big and famous enough that I can just pay somebody to transcribe it like he does. But until then, I do have Dragon Naturally Speaking, and I do have the ability to transcribe. I just got to get better at. I just got to put the time in.
Yeah. I think as a starter, as a way to, like you said, to basically outline or to just get some ideas down that you could refine, I could probably do that. But so we got about 5 minutes, man. What are some of the other points from our list that we might want to hit up?
Let's see.
Barriers to writing that we can just blow up and knock down. And if you're watching right now and you've got one of your own, a question or something, feel free to pop that in. And while he's looking at that list, make sure you go on over. It's a janky URL, and I apologize, but if you go to bookhip.com/Denzel all caps, DLHMVK. I'll get a prettier URL at some point, but you can download a very short ebook for free called Improving Your Writing Craft that you might find useful. And you do get on our mailing list, which we will start sending some folks some cool stuff pretty soon. So, did you find
I read your book. I read your book, and I thought it was good. Yeah. And I got
it
a couple
takes
of
about
good,
10 minutes
craft.
to read. It's very
I know
short.
it's short. It's short, but I think there's so many books out there that like you have to like read like all the theory and philosophy behind it, right? You don't have that kind of depth. You like got right to the point.
No,
it's great.
I'm a very shallow person.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we talked about a lot of things, and interruptions. What I want to say, there's a couple things that really when I asked about this on Facebook, a lot of things came up. There was like anxiety and procrastination, those kinds of things. I think we kind of covered some of those things. Imposter syndrome, self-doubt. One of the ones that I see come up a lot, and I think is like sort of end on a fun note, is people tell me that their characters got away from them. Like my character wrote me into a corner. There was nothing I could do to stop him, and now my book is like, now I don't know what to do. Has that ever happened to you, Kevin?
My characters do own those stories. Yes, they run. What I think of it this way: the characters are like the Colorado River, and I am furiously building channels so that I can focus the water in a general direction. That's my job as the author.
Yeah. So I believe that as well.
Yeah.
But I also believe that at some point, if it's really heading off, the river is really heading off towards some sort of like a innocent little small town over there that's not part of my story, I can use the nuclear option and redirect my river in a different direction. So I feel like all of our characters are our own subconscious.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's a story that I want to tell. It's not a story my character wants to tell. So yeah, I can see that. I've done the same thing where I get to the point, like I find myself, like writing this character has got me in this place I didn't want to go. And now I'm stuck because it's no longer leading to the ending that I want to happen. So, it's like like I said before, there are no wasted words written, but you've now learned where your character doesn't want to go, and you can cut that off, save that.
I've cut scenes from books. I've done this, and I think this is what you're referring to. So, I get to the muddy middle, or I get to a point where I can't see a way forward from where I am. The great thing about being the author of the book is that you can go back and change subtle details earlier in the book to give yourself that opening. It's almost like Deus Ex Machina, but it's, you're using your superpowers as the author to change history. And then once history is changed and rewritten, you can go forward. I've done that quite a bit. And I've got what I call, I stole this term from the comic book industry, my ash can, which is in each Scrivener. I use Scrivener to write. You could do this in just a folder on your desktop or something, but I have a little additional folder in Scrivener that I call my ash can, where if I'm writing a scene and I decide I can't use that scene or I don't want that scene, I lift it and I drop it into the ash can so that I could always refer back to it later, use it for something else or whatever. So every book has one or two of those scenes.
I love that visualization there of the time machine, the time travel. Like as an author, you can time travel and go back and put something in that's going to see the idea that you later wrote, right?
Yeah, quantum leap your book. Put right what once went wrong.
Michael Bunker your book.
Michael Bunker your book.
Yes, because we all know he's a time traveler. We just don't know from the past or from the future.
Does it even matter anymore? At a certain point, I think that's the era we live in now. Time is completely irrelevant. So we're coming up to the 45-minute mark, and that was when we kind of wanted to wrap things up. Do you want to interject one more point or anything, or you got something else to add?
No, I think that, well, yeah, I mean, I think just to sort of sum up, and there are many reasons why you either cannot write your book, stop writing your book, can't finish your book. Some of them are physical, some of them are temporal, you just don't have the time, and some of them are in the creative realm where so you kind of have to figure out what is blocking you, and there are plenty of solutions to get through that, whether it's some of the techniques that Kevin and I talked about today, or just like laying it down sometimes it takes just writing down what your problem is before you can, just like you write an outline of your story, like you're writing your own, what is the story of writing your story, right? Write this down and the solution is likely to come to you.
I agree. All right. And don't dismiss the magic of shaking things up and trying a whole new approach to your writing. I think, in fact, here's your homework. I know a lot of people are going to hate it and not even try it, but go and use your smartphone and open a document and spend an hour, spend 20 minutes writing something on your phone, or 10 minutes, whatever you're comfortable with, and just try it. See how you like it. You don't have to write an entire book that way, the way Michael Roland does, but you could get an idea for a scene out of that. So use it sort of as a way to shift gears and create a writing prompt that might help you when you sit down with your notepad or your laptop, whatever it is you prefer to write on. So there's your homework.
And if you don't know what to write, start with the classic free writing start. Kevin is such a jerk for making me write this.
Do it. I want to see these. Post these in the comments on this video. I'll be happy to read them. Okay, so here we are at the end. And if you've watched it, you're tuning in. We've had numbers dancing in and out throughout the broadcast, so I'm glad to see you guys. If you're tuning in from Facebook, YouTube, or elsewhere, make sure you subscribe to us on all those channels. We do need YouTube subscribers so that we can change this ugly URL that we have. So go, wait, did we do the right one? So this is my bit.ly link. Go to bit.ly/IAB YouTube, and that should lead you to our YouTube channel. And once we've got a certain number of subscribers, we can get a custom URL. So help us out with that. We're new.
That's going to look so sweet.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. That's the juice, baby. So go check that out. And of course, go to indieauthor.blueprint.com, where you can sign up to be on our newsletter as well. So you can be alerted. We didn't do it this time, Roland. I didn't send an email to alert everybody. We've got to get our systems in place. That's what we've got to do. But go check that out. But there's going to be tons of information on that site. We're adding stuff all the time. Sarah, our magic elf, our IAB elf, is adding content all the time that will help you in your indie author / self-publishing career. And
Kevin and I got some great stuff coming. We've got coaching and courses and Kevin's books. We've got more things coming like that. And we're just really excited to get it out there. So if you want to be the first to hear about it, sign up for the email list and get Kevin's book, Improving Your Writing Craft, for free.
Do it. Enjoy.
Do it. Just do it. Just sit down and do it.
Just sit down. Just write. Just right. We could have skipped this entire webinar. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're going to go now. Oh, I had one more comment pop up. Let's see what it is. Here, Mikey says, sometimes when you get stuck, it's a clue that you're bored with a scene. It needs action or tension or a sense of progression, ergo character development. So I ask what the point of the scene is. And that, I can't think of a better parting bit of advice. Thank you, Mikey, for that. Mr. Roland,
is great. That is great advice. It's Tuesday. Go out and enjoy some tacos. Sign up for Indie Author Blueprint, and we will see you very soon.
All right. Take care, everybody.